Hi everyone. We got a little agenda here today, something very interesting, and having LDAP. A lot of people are using LDAP for authentication these days, and we're going to be looking on how we can authenticate. We're going to kind of set up Postgres and see how we could authenticate using LDAP on Windows. And again, there are a couple of other setups there where you can have LDAP on Linux, but here we're just going to see how we could simulate having LDAP on Windows and then having our database running on Linux and how this authentication can be done from Windows. So we have a basic agenda to here where we're going to set up a LDAP in Windows. This is just going to be a basic setup, and then we're going to install and set up Postgres on Linux, and that is what we'll use to authenticate an LDAP on Windows. And we're going to create some credentials for Postgres on that particular on the LDAP that we create. And then we're just going to set up Postgres and see exactly how this authentication works when we're connecting to Postgres and then it's authenticating in Windows. So we're just going to dive right in and see exactly. This is just going to be a live demo from scratch. So um, yeah, so you just let's just follow along and see exactly where we get to. All right. Okay, so what we have here is a empty Windows machine. I have it on a virtual machine. So and I do have these are the two servers I have here. This is my Linux machine right here, and I can log into this Linux machine. It's just as an empty machine here, and I also have my LDAP Windows. This is Windows Server, and this is where I will set up. I'll set up LDAP right here. And to begin first, what I always like to do is to make sure that I set up the host names for these servers. And right here, let me do CMD. And I'm just gonna pull this down here a little bit. So if I, so so on this server, let me do an IF config here. This is the IP address 0122. And then on my Postgres machine, which is running on Linux, IF config, I could see that I have it at 172. So 172 for my Linux machine and for LDAP 222. So I'm going to set up the host names here. And I will do that by going into Notepad, and I'm going to open Notepad as administrator. And that I will click on open. And I will go to Windows, and I think I should look for system 32 here. Then I go to drivers, I think, yeah, drivers and etc. And I'm gonna say show all files, and here is my host file. So again, this is my IP address of my Windows machine. I'm gonna put that there, and I'm just gonna call this server ldap.benson.hub2.org. And then for my Windows server, which is 172, I think you remember that 172 and 72. I'm gonna call it um, I'm just gonna call it Postgres. Postgres.benson.hub2.org, and then you can have any domain you want depending on your organization. So I'm gonna copy this out. I'm gonna put the same thing. Oops, go to my Postgres server. In this case, it's gonna be in etc host, and I'm gonna put it in here. Oh, it can't paste. Yeah, that's one thing sometimes to copy from Windows and from Linux. So I know 122. 19. Let me see. I can stay paste 192.168.0.122, and this is gonna be LDAP.benson dot hop2.org, and then this one 192.168.0.172. This is going to be my Postgres.benson.hop2.org. Then so I'm gonna save this, and over here on my Windows server, that's fine. I'm just gonna save that as well, and I can close this. So right here, if I decide to do a ping of Postgres.benson.hop2.org, I should have a response there. It's pinging right well. And then on my Postgres server, if I do a ping on ldap.benson.hop2.org, and everything should be working fine. Redirect gateway. Next loop. Sure that one works fine. From 171. From 171, 172. Let me cross check here. 172. Why is that? Let me see. 172. Oh, I made a mistake here. This is 9. Sorry. Yeah, this is 0 here. Yeah, sometimes you gotta be careful. Okay, now let me ping this, and the response should look good now. Yeah, initially it was looking weird. Okay, so we're good there, and everything is looking okay. All right, so the next thing here is you can just minimize this window, and I'll open my server manager, and you open the server manager, you go to add roles and features, and you take next, and you leave it to role and installation there. You take next, and this is my LDAP server here, which I already have there, and you see that is the IP address of that server. All right, so say yes, I take next on that, and right here, a couple of things here. Active Directory services. Yes, Active Directory services. Oh, look like already have it installed. Everything is already there. So, but then if not, just want to make sure you have that. Okay, and so take next, and features there, groups, group policy management. Yes, that's there. Let me see here. Okay, that's fine. Yes, everything is there. Let me just install this so that if you see exactly what goes on, but yeah, we should be good there. You can take next. If you wanted to restart while it's doing that, you can say yes, let it restart during the installation process, and you click on next, and the installation process begins. Okay. 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 So let's give it a little minute. Let's get completed. Okay, look like installation succeeded. We can go ahead and close this, but it did look like I already had one. So when it succeeds, you can come over here where you see this notification here, and it says promote this server to a domain controller. So this is where you have to do this. Then he asks for, you need to add a domain controller to an existing domain. No, that's not what we want. Add a new domain to an existing forest. That's not what we want. We want to create, we want to add a new forest. So here I'm just going to put uh, benson.hop2.org here, and I'm going to take next. Okay, with next, and I'm going to ask me for a password, which I'll provide my password here. And oops, sorry, it looks like I made a mistake with that password. So I'm gonna put my password here, and I'm gonna put my password here. Take next. Okay, and then over there now it says create DNS delegation. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna take a next. Then just give it a little while. It should be able to populate and show us our net BIOS domain name that we mentioned there already. Okay, that's Benson. That's fine. Take next. Okay, so we have all the database location, log files, and everything there. That's looking good. Okay, go next. And then now we have a review of everything so far. And yeah, so with that, we can take a next. Next. Okay. Then it might give us a couple of little things here, as you could see, but that's fine. Um, might want to review all of that, but it's okay. All prerequisites check pass successfully, so you can go ahead and install. So go ahead and click on install and give it a little moment. It might take a little while um, to get everything up and running. Okay. So it's gonna create all the directory partitions. It's gonna do everything set up. Okay, starting. Sometimes it might restart, but yeah. Say okay. You're about to be logged on. Say yes, that's okay. And the server was successfully configured as a domain controller. Okay, so all right, I think it's gonna do a restart, which is fine. And yep, and then we should be back up, and we should be up with a basic LDAP setup. Again, there are other many different types of things you might want to check there, but this is just a basic LDAP setup I'm doing here. And then I'm not using any certificates, but you could, depending on your environment, and there are a lot of things you could wanna do. Okay, so let's let that come up. And again, when you have it already running, you might want to create different OUs, organizational units. You can do so many different things there, you know. Yeah, it's all up to you. All right, let's just give it a little moment. Okay. Okay, the changes have been applied. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and log in. So we see now that we have a domain, Benson's administrator. So let's go ahead and log in there. Okay, so that's good. Let server manager loads up and everything looking good. We should be able to, if you click on tools here, you should be able to see Active Directory users and computers. Okay, you can click on that. Okay, and yes, you could see here we have domain right here. And, if we click here on this domain here, we can expand this. Okay, and you could see everything we got. So if we click on domain controllers, the domain controller we have. So this is our domain controller we have here. Right? This is our domain controller. Okay, so everything is looking good. And again, for users here, there are a couple of things you can do. You can create organizational units. You can do a whole lot of stuff here, but I'm not going to go too deep into creating those different groups of users and then, putting each user into every group and then going into creating and whatever, all of that stuff. The main goal is, I assume you already have an LDAP setup, and this is just a demo. I'm not going too deep into creating organizational units. So here, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a user here, which we're going to use for this purpose. So, and you could just right click here and then you take new and then you create a user, or you could decide to, you want to create another administrator user, you could do that. And let me just go ahead and do that. I'm just going to copy everything from that particular user there. And I'm just going to create mine. All right. And I'm going to give the name to be, I'm just going to call it Yerima. All right. And the initials, the last name, I'm going to call it EDB. So you might want to put whatever logo name you want. You can want to use something like, let me just use EDB here. I'm just going to use something else, Ben. Okay. And I'm just going to say my logo name here should be Yerima Ben. Okay. So I got that there. Yerima Ben. I'm going to say next. Next here. Password, I'll leave it to password never expire. And I'm going to give a password here. And I'm going to give another password. Repeat the same password there. I'm going to take next. And this is everything I get to know from here. And that's it, finish. So I have a user here already. I've created a new user. If I look at the properties for this user, okay, you realize that on the account, all right, you see this is a logon name, everything is there, and it's logging on here. Okay. There are a couple of things when you're setting up this. Some areas, some situations, you might have to use Kerberos or use Kerberos AES encryption. You might, enable that as well. That's up to you. A couple of things you might want to do. Okay. Anyway, we have a user already there. That's fine. We have a user on LDAP side, which is okay. All right. Now the next thing we have to do here is so the next thing we're gonna do here is that um, before we could be able to, before we can establish any authentication, we need to extract a file, which is called the key tab file. And again, this comes with Kerberos. Windows comes with Kerberos already. Um, it comes with Kerberos, as we already saw there, as you could see from here. So it comes already with Kerberos. So what we're going to do is we're going to generate a key tab file, and we're going to use that key tab file on our Postgres server. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open PowerShell. So let me open up PowerShell here. And here you go. So we're going to run a couple of commands to generate that key tab file. Okay, so let me go into desktop so that when I generate the file, I have it here on my desktop. So I'm going to run setSPN and -s. Then I'm going to specify my Postgres host where I have Postgres running. And that host is in postgres.benson.hub2.org. And then I will need to specify my domain controller, which is benson.hub2.org. And after that, the next thing I'm going to specify my user, because you need to just kind of make sure that you are the admin user here to generate that. So setSPN, everything looks okay here. I put my Postgres host there, and I put my domain controller, hit enter. Checking, yeah, that looks okay. And then the next command I'm going to run will be for this host here, which is my which was specifying the host, still pointing to which is still pointing to my Postgres host. Okay, host, and it's gonna be the same. Let's find where my host is. Let's see if there's anything I need to modify here. This should be okay. And then I hit enter. So that is fine. And then at this point, I need to generate a key tab file. And here, sometimes if you run this command and it fails, you need to find out what it is. So I'm going to use a ktparse command, and I'm going to specify my output file, and I'm going to call it I'm just going to call it Benson Benson 1. That's fine. Benson.keytab. Okay. Benson.keytab. And that's going to be the output file, which is going to be written to my desktop. And I will need this file to send this file across to my Postgres server. I'm going to specify the principals here, which I'm going to specify my same host where I have so I'm just going to copy the same thing I have here. All right, all of this to here. Okay, specifying my Postgres host and also specifying my domain controller. And then the next thing I do is here is I will need to map the user here. And I will have to specify my, which is going to be here in my ben, add my domain controller. All right, so which is going to be add my domain controller.org. All right, let's go to my domain controller.org. And then one important thing which I need to pass here will be the password for this particular user. And I'm going to specify the password here. 1, 2, 3. Let's find the password. And let me extend this. And I'm going to specify the P type. All right, I'm going to say you can go ahead and use KRB, KRB5, KRB5, and T, and yeah, principal. Make sure everything looks good here. Okay, if everything looks good, you don't want to make sure you have an error here, because if the generation of the key tab file has an error, then there is no need proceeding. You just need to just stop right there and then try to figure out what is going on. So with this in mind, let me hit enter. Okay, this is the message you need to get successfully. It's successful. You don't see any error here. And if you look at your desktop, you should see the key tab file created there. So it created that key tab file. Now, at this level, everything should be fine. Everything should be okay. So it has generated everything, and you could actually see that when you run your set SPN, basically. Oh, so I'm not gonna use this. Set SPN for it just to list what you have there. Here in my band. Ben. Okay, so you could see everything is okay. So now the main important thing is having this key tab file generated. All right. So when you have this key tab file generated, okay, that's fine. Now the next thing is we need to ship this key tab file across to our Postgres instance. All right, very important. We need to send that key tab file across. So over here on my Postgres instance, what I can do here is, there are a couple of ways you might want to send that file across. But in this case, I'll see if I have WinSCP. Looks like I don't have WinSCP here. I like to use that. It's kind of, okay, I have it here. No big deal. So I can just open up WinSCP there, and I will send that file across. So I will connect to my host, which is postgres.benson.hub2.org, and I'm going to connect there as root. Or you might want to connect as Postgres as Enterprise DB. I will do that as Enterprise DB. I'm going to put the password here. And everything works good. You should be able to connect good. So I'm connected. So I'm going to put this file in the data directory for my Postgres server, right? So this is my data directory. I'm going to put that file there. So let's search for that file here on the desktop. This is the file. I'm going to put this file across there. Okay. So I have the file there now, that's good. So with that file there, the next thing, let's jump over to our Postgres server. And let's log in to the Postgres server here. Log into the Postgres server there. Let's log in as Enterprise DB. And let's cd into AS10 data. And you see, this is the location where we kept the file. So let's list this. We should be able to see a key tab file right here. And again, this key tab file, you need to make this permission to be 600. Okay, so don't leave it the way it is. You might have some issues. So we're going to put it to 600. Okay. Okay, so we have that file permission turns to 600. Okay, everything looks fine, and make sure it's owned by Enterprise DB. Okay, the next thing here is we need to edit this. We need to add this file to, we need to add this file to a particular, we need to put it on a particular parameter in the PostgreSQL.conf file. So we're going to edit the PostgreSQL.conf file. And let me just copy this location here. And we need to look for a file called KRB. So, okay. So here you need to use this. So let me uncomment that. And I will need to indicate the location where I have that file, which is benson.keytab. And again, if you have the file in a different location, well, that's fine. But you just mention the location here and just make sure it's owned by Postgres and modify the permissions as well. So I'm going to save that. Okay, what I can do here is I'm going to restart the Postgres server here. pgctl -d and restart. So everything is started. Let me try to connect here. And okay, that should be fine. Let's just check to make sure we have a KRB. So we have KRB server key file, KRB server key file. So we see that everything it's there, and always kind of try to make sure that your listing addresses is set well, because if not, you might have issues there. Listing addresses set to star, which is fine. Accepting connections from everywhere. Okay. So what we can do here is we can go ahead and just create a user. I'm just gonna have to create a user, and I'm gonna call it here in my band. And now note that this user I'm creating here is the user I have that exists in the LDAP server. All right, this user does exist in the LDAP server, but again, it's not. We're not going to grant any password for this user here. Right? Just create the user like that. Okay, so we can go ahead and then specify our domain, which is we're just going to specify this in caps, which is benson.hop2.org there. And we're going to just say, let's just put it a super user here. It might be your application user, it might be put create role, just put also create DB. Anyway, it's a super user equal to any of that. So we just created this user here, but we've not given any password. So everything will have to be specified from the domain controller. So one last thing, not really last thing, but important step here is to edit your PGHPA file. So edit the PGHPA location here, and we can go ahead here and specify unspecified entry. So for you to really know that everything it's going to be authenticated from LDAP, let me just do this. I'm going to comment out all of this, right, so that you really see that everything is from LDAP, right? And even I might just leave that. Yeah, that's fine. So that's just for local entry anyway. You can comment that as well. So I'm just going to leave local entry, and I'm just going to comment this as well. Just want to show something here. So I'm going to do host, and I'm going to do all. And over here, I'm going to do all. But then you might not want to do all in everywhere. If you have a couple of users, you might want to make sure that you include you include them individually. So I'm just going to say let it accept connection from everywhere. And then, oh no, there's something I wanted to show here, which is very important. GSS. So this setup we're doing here is not correct. We're going to change this. The reason here is this type of connection uses generic security service. So GSS, which is not, which is which is available from PostgreSQL 12, I think. So if you see here, we don't have you don't see any support for GSS here. All right, so we can actually use this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to install Postgres 12. Okay, and I don't think I have Postgres 12 here on this machine. Let me just check if I have any Postgres 12. No, I don't have any PostgreSQL 12 installation here. Okay, let me just go ahead and install it. So let me do yum install ADB server 12. Let me just run that for 12. Oh. Yeah, I got a couple of reports here which kind of tries to test those repositories, but I'm sure it should go through. Okay. Say yes. So it's getting my Postgres 12 installed here. Okay, that's good. That is done. I think we would need to initialize Postgres there. USI EDB AS 12 bin, and I think we need to see that. Let me see. Okay, it's going to be EDBS 12 setup. Okay. All right. So let me just do that. EDB AS12 setup init DB. Okay, so this will initialize Postgres 12. So it is initialized. So okay, that's fine. So let me log in as Enterprise DB here. Okay, so I have my Postgres 12 here, but what I want to do is to copy. I'm going to copy that file that we already have over there. Data, Benson tab, and I'm going to copy it to AS12 data. All right, so I'm going to put it there. All right, so right now let me go ahead and stop the Postgres 10, and the reason for this is just because anyway, there's no need anyway. Let me just leave that. Okay, let me cd into 12 AS12 data. All right, so we have so these are Postgres 12 here. So let's vi into the postgresql.conf file. Okay, we're gonna just make sure our listener address is set there. So we're going to change the port since we already have 10 running on that particular port. So I'm gonna put this to 5. And just simplicity's sake, sorry, here. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna look for that KRB, and I'm going to okay, I'm going to specify the file location. So I'm just gonna say var lib edb s12 data, then benson.keytab. All right, I think that should be it for this. And that should be fine there. Okay, so one next thing is, let me open the PGHPA. Okay, now you see here that we have support for GSS. If you saw earlier in 10, there was no support for GSS. So you could use GSS and you could decide to put host no GSS. All right, so note that. So here, for simplicity's sake, and to really show that this is going to be authenticated from Windows, I just want to comment out this. All right, and then we're going to add us here. Just going to leave all, and then just going to leave all. I'm going to put 0, 0, 0, 0, accept it from everywhere. And this is where we're going to specify GSS, and then we're going to say include RAM, right? Because we have a RAM, and we're going to create this RAM just a little bit. Include RAM equals 1, yes, and then we have to specify a KRB RAM. So a KRB RAM here is going to be benson.hub2.org. All right, everything looks good here. Then I will save this file and exit. Oh, what's happening? Oh, yeah, it's in caps. Okay, so right now we could start this server here. So let me see which binaries we're calling here. Oh, let me just go ahead and export that. Path, it's gonna be usr/edb/as12. Oh, as12, yeah, /bin. And dollar path. Okay. So which PSQL? Okay, it's calling now from the right PSQL. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to start my Postgres 12 instance and put start. Okay, that is started. So now if we log in there on port 5445, database, okay, ADB, port 5445, that's fine. If we do show KRB server key file, so which is good, everything is looking fine. Okay, so everything is looking okay here. So the next thing we have to do here is, in order for this Linux server to communicate to the Windows server, we need a file which is called the KRB-conf file, and we will need to edit that file to point to our Windows LDAP server. You could see a couple of those files online, a sample of those files online, but the easiest way I want to do is just to install those packages, KRB server You might just install it so that we'll be able to get that file. KRB5 of KRB5 server. I'm just going to also can install the maybe KRB5 workstation if you want like KRB5 workstation, and you might want to also add a PAM. But anyway, all these are just packages some of them I will use later on, but not really obligated to install all of them. But at least you should have the KRB5 server. All right, so I go and install. This should be able to set up to install that. And when this is installed, we should be able to see a file. If we cd2, if we list /etc and we look for krb star, we should be able to see this file. So this is the file we're looking at. So it creates this file, and this is a file we need to edit. All right. So we're just gonna vi this file, and we're gonna do a couple of edits here. Now, some of the editing that you will do here is just to tell this server that okay, you know where your domain controller is. Right? So we could leave the KDC admin. We could leave everything as default. We'll need to uncomment this guy here, which is a default RAM. Right. So I'm going to uncomment this here, and I'm going to specify. That's in caps. You see the example there is in caps, so you just maintain that as it is. hub2.org, and then what next is you will need to specify the RAM here. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna uncomment all of these. Okay, and for my RAM here, I'm gonna put the same thing here, which I have here. All right, I'm gonna include that here. And if you see down here, I will need to put the same thing here. Okay. There are a couple of edits I still need to do here. I need to uncomment this, comment this, and my KDC. Where is my KDC? I need to specify where my KDC is. And we know that our KDC is in ldap.benson.hub2.org. Right. Since I'm going to specify the same thing here, just going to copy that out. And I'm going to specify same thing here. And over here, this is going to be the same, benson.hub2.org. This is going to be benson.hub2.org. All right. So the necessary configurations here need to verify everything is looking good. So this Windows server will be talking to your KDC, right? Pointing which is in Windows to obtain the ticket granting ticket and also the service tickets. All right. You see, every ticket has its lifetime, right? All these have parameters you could reconfigure, but yeah, this is just a demo, so we're just leaving the lifetimes and everything as its default. So I'm going to save this file. Okay, now that you have the file saved there, I think we should be good here right now. What we could do here now is we need to obtain the ticket granting ticket because this is incorporated with Kerberos authentication. So you obtain the ticket granting ticket, you use the ticket granting ticket in order to obtain your service ticket, which needs to be decrypted by your service principal to get uh, a connection to the database. All right. So what we're going to do here is we will try to connect to Postgres instance here. All right. So in order for us to connect to Postgres instance, let me log back in as Enterprise DB. And now basically I need to obtain my ticket. I need to connect as that user, the user which I created before. Right? The user I created before, which is Yuri Ben. But Yuri Ben has all credentials in the in the LDAP server. And again, this connection, you could be coming from a separate server, right? You could be establishing this connection from a separate server where you have your Postgres running on a different server, and then you have your LDAP on a different server, basically. So if your client server, you have to just make sure that you kind of have those credentials there for the KRB conf file configured there. So because you use that to obtain your credentials from the LDAP and then connect to a database. So right quick here, what we're going to do here is we first need to obtain our ticket. We just need to obtain a ticket granting ticket. We do that by running a command called kinit. So we run kinit. I'm going to run kinit here in my ben. Add, I'm going to provide my domain controller here, which is this hop2.org. Now, when it tries to obtain these credentials here, it will require for the password. And this is the password I put in Windows in my, there is password for this user that are specified in Windows over here. So if we hop back to Windows for a little bit, let me just show you what happened here. Oops. Let me log in here. So we hop in here a little bit. You realize that um, uh, over here on my here this user, when I generated the key tab file, you could see that you see that the logon cannot change. So that's one thing you realize that. But then your logon still works. Okay, so again, the password we've specified here when creating this user inside LDAP here, that is what we need to specify. So when we run this, it asks for the password. Now the password is asking here, as I mentioned again, is a password for your LDAP server. And this is when, if the password works, it will now give you a ticket granting ticket. So let's go ahead and put our password. So it will not return you anything, right? But if there's an issue, it will return you, give you a problem. So now to see if you actually got the ticket granting ticket from your domain controller, you run klist. Right. Now, if you see here, you see that I obtained a ticket granting ticket from my domain controller, right, in Windows, right? Now, what I'm going to do now is I will need to forward this ticket granting ticket, which will give me a service ticket, and that service ticket, I will forward it to my principal, which will decrypt that. Note I already have a key tab file over there. So again, there's a lot more in Kerberos that you need to understand, maybe how the entire Kerberos authentication goes. There are principally 3 stages, but then they're kind of a little bit deeper if you have to go into it. But again, now good. Now we see here that we actually obtained a ticket and we've cached that ticket. And note that these tickets have a duration, right? You see here when it actually expires, right? So now that I have my ticket, my TGT here, I can attempt to connect now to the database, right? I'm going to attempt a connection to the database. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run PSQL, right? And what you can do here is basically, let me just make sure I export binaries. I run PSQL, specify -H. I'm just mimicking that I'm actually connecting from a quite different server. So I'm going to put there, I'm connecting to Postgres, benson.hop2.org, and then I'm just connecting to port 5445. That's where that server is running. And then let me say I'm connecting to the database EDB, and I'm going to connect as the user, which is Yerima Ben. Add, I'm going to specify my domain controller. And this is because I indeed indicated that the RAM is set to 1, so it's going to require that RAM. So hop2.org. So if everything looks fine, this connection should succeed. Okay, well, this does not exist. I was gonna see maybe something happened there. Fatah Ro Yerima Ben at Benton Hop 2. Okay, let's see what's going on here. It says this role does not exist. Now let me see how I created that role in the database. I did created a role. Oh, this is before. Okay, maybe there was a little mistake somewhere. Oh no, maybe I passed that. I created it maybe somewhere. Somewhere I created that. This is not too far up here because oh, maybe I've not created it yet. Oh, I created it. Oh yeah, I created me login and create that. I created it on the Postgres 10. Okay, I'm gonna log in as I'm gonna, because if I do /du, the role does not. Oh, the role does exist here. Show pod. Oh no, this is not the server I'm connected to. Okay, so I need to specify 5445. So if I do /du, yeah, that role does not exist. Okay, so we will need to create that role. So I'm gonna create that role. Create user, right? Super user. Okay, so that role has been created. Note I did not specify any password for that particular role. All right, no password. So now let's attempt our connection now. And good, you see that our connection is encrypted and we are able to connect, right? So this is how, and this, you could see here that the credentials for that user is obtained from the domain controller itself. Right? It's actually obtained from the domain controller. So again, You know, if you create a user in the domain controller, for example, even if I create a user, right? Even if I create a user now, look at this. Even if I log into that server and I decide to create another user and I call this user, I call it, um, what can I call it? Let me just use a random name. Let me just say test user. If I create this user called test user, now the test user has been created. If I attempt to connect as this test user here, it won't work. Test user, right? If I attempt to do this connection, it will should give me this error that failed for this user, the authentication failed for this user. Now, what you're seeing here is that even though this user exists in the database, right, this connection need to be GSS API authenticated, which does not exist for that user. So basically, you need to make sure that this user exists in the domain controller. So what we're going to do here is let's just quickly come to the domain controller here. Let's just quickly create this user here. Uh, I'm just going to make it another admin user. But if you don't want, that's fine. You could just create a normal user, right? And new, I'm just going to create a normal user here. I'm just going to say this is going to be a test user, right? No last name, log on. I'm going to leave it to be a test user. Then say next. And I'll decide, I'll say the password should never expire. Then again, the password never expire. Say next. So I have a user, test user now, which is being created here. So finish. So I've created that. But if I log back up here, and since I have the user created now in my domain controller, and the user also exists in my database, if I attempt the connection, it's still going to fail. Now, the reason why this is failing is because you need to obtain the TGT for that user, because these are two different users. Because if I do klist here, if I do klist here, if you do klist, you realize that you have the service principal and the TGT for the user, for this user, Irima Ben. That is what is actually being cached here. So you have the credentials cached for a different user, right? And so this other user, test user you're using to connect cannot use these credentials. So what you need to do is you need to clear this cache and obtain the TGT at the service principal for this user before you can establish a connection. So what you need to do, how can you do? You can destroy the cache. You can use a command called kdestroy, kdestroy-a. That shouldn't return you anything, but if you do klist now, it should be empty. So the cache is actually empty right now. So you've cleared the cache. So what you need to do now is to obtain the TGT for that user, right, by running kinit. So we're going to run kinit for the test user now, which is going to be test user. And then we have to provide to make sure that it's authenticated from the LDAP server. And if the authentication works fine, you should obtain the TGT for this user. So I'm going to put the password. So if I do klist now I've obtained the TGT for that user. Now with this TGT, I can be able to establish a connection to my Postgres server. So if I run this now, I expect my connection to work. So it says continuous to verify this. A minor code could provide information found in Kerberos database. There seems to be a little issue there at the Kerberos database there. Might need to figure out why unspecified. Okay. Okay, it looks like, oh, for some reason my cake, I don't know what happened. Maybe I locked it out. Look at my domain controller went down. Let me just start up the domain controller again. For some reason, it went down. Maybe I mistakenly shut it down. I don't know. Okay. So again, that's just the entire process. So let it come up, and 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 you could see here that if when your domain controller, for example, in our case here, it was it was using, since it obtained the TGT, it was using that TGT now to provide to the domain controller to obtain the service ticket. So at this point now, it won't work. So let's make sure that domain controller comes up, and then we establish a connection. And again, this is just proving to you that everything is being everything is coming from um, and this is just proving to you that everything is coming from the from the domain controller. So a domain controller is up. Let's attempt the connection again. So you see there, the connection now works, right? So with the TGT that we got, we are able to establish a connection using this user. So when you create the user now in the domain controller, you have the user in the database, you obtain the TGT for that user, and then you use that TGT to obtain both your service ticket and everything. Right? So this is exactly how the authentication using Windows LDAP actually works.